this is our first show that we're recording after uh,
Capitol Hill Gate.
Yeah, I don't even know what to call it. A bunch of fucking traitors tried to storm the Capitol, and we're seeing, we've seen images of this jackass with and sorry, I'm not going to sugarcoat any of this fucking twat with a
That's the most British you've ever sounded.
He's got a Valknut tattooed. He's got something that looks like a Thor's hammer and all that stuff. Wearing
the worst Milner I've ever seen in my life as well.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Wearing some fake ass Native American head regalia. It looks like actually coyote skin. And I mean,
he's also got the generic Google Yggdrasil around the nipple as well.
Yes.
I was about to say, yeah.
That's the one that when you Google Yggdrasil, that's the one that comes up. Everyone will have seen it. It's, as basic as you can get when it comes to getting an Yggdrasil tattoo. No offense to anybody out there that has the same one, but it is very much the archetypal one you see.
Yeah. So, yeah. What do you think about that?
I want to say that at least, like, if I'm going to give him some credit, I think that the hammer is actually the most original design there.
It actually is.
Well, yeah.
So I don't. So reluctantly, I'm going to give him that. But there's a few things to say about this, of course, and it's very regrettable that this is such a topic, and you got the media going around like saying that all of this is synonymous with white power and stuff like that, which is of course complete hogwash in some ways, but in other ways, it's a confusing terrain for these people to navigate, because quite frankly they don't have any clue what they're talking about. So there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, I think that's what we need to keep in mind as well, is what I've repeatedly said on this show, is that it's not the audience of this show that we need to convince. Otherwise, it's the average Joe on the street who knows nothing about this culture and this community who sees something like that, and then they just see somebody else maybe on Facebook say, oh, well, that's a white supremacist symbol, and automatically that connection in their mind is then made. So every time they see that symbol, because they don't know any better, and you can't really blame them, because I guess it's just like us going on Facebook and seeing a symbol from a different culture and somebody saying it links to something like white supremacy, and you kind of just take it at face value if you don't know the in-depth.
Yeah, but I'm also like there are also other things that I'm that concerns me about this, and that's one of the things is that that these journalists they take things at very much face value, right? Because when you actually look at this guy's worldview, there's not a lot of neo-paganism, not a lot of Norse, like Asatru, in this guy's worldview. Maybe there was at the time he got these tattoos. I don't know, but like when you see this stuff, yeah, when he posts, it's like full-blown Jesus freak. It's like conservative Christian, know.
So wasn't he outside holding a sign up, something to do with God is great or something? I'm sure I saw that.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But like he does that, and he's got this full crystal healing stuff. So this is really just your run-of-the-mill sort of like right-wing American, New Age adjacent sort of like conservative Christian stuff. It's nothing new. But I think that this is something that I often talk about. It's that that in sort of the Western hegemony, which is like, what is that, like France, England, the USA, I don't know, there are probably others that could be included there. None of these cultures associate themselves with this, Germanic heritage. So it's very easy for them to just say that this is inherently suspect, It's like you can't go around saying, like in the UK, that like Boudica is some sort of like nationalist symbol or something like that, because it's like it's a symbol they're sympathetic towards. Just like in Scandinavia, just seeing somebody with a rune tattoo in Norway, nobody thinks twice. They might think that they've got eccentric interests or something, but it's not something that is inherently suspect.
No, I mean as I've said before, we in Scandinavia we have even graffiti that's like runic designs or from even from rune stones, so it's like it's very common. It's part of our general identity. Go to the city hall in Copenhagen if you're ever in Copenhagen as a tourist. I definitely advise to go to the city hall. It's a really interesting construction in and of itself. It's basically a replica of the city hall of the medieval Italian town Siena. So it's like the Copenhageners were like, yeah, let's copy that in the early 1900s. And then they loaded it up with pictures and imagery from like paintings from the sagas. There's like these huge ballrooms just full of Odin over here and Hrolf Kraki over there, and all of that stuff. So I mean, these things are very, very normal to us in Scandinavia.
Yes, but as I said, like the kind of in the English speaking world, like interest in the, and I would even wager that in America there's kind of like it's a very strong word, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Like there's a little bit of anti-German sentiment in American culture. Like it's not the heritage you're the most proud of. It's not what you speak the loudest about. Because 2 world wars, you can't really. There's no shock. Why? But there's not it's not exactly a super celebrated thing outside of like sausages and beer.
Yeah.
And so this kind of like, if you even know what the runes are, a very strong interest in these subjects is kind of like, it's kind of like a marginalized thing. Not necessarily in that it's always something suspicious, but it's always something that is kind of like weird. Why would you be interested in that? And that's like a typical like kind of like, as I like to say, it's kind of like a Roman thing. It's like this kind of bias towards what is barbarian. And so like and whatever is marginalized gets appeal. It's appealing if you're not if you're not in that kind of in-group, if you're part of that kind of opposition. Any symbols that are rejected, and this is esotericism. Esotericism is rejected knowledge, right? I think that's Wouter Hanegraaff's definition. That's a scholarly definition, by the way. In kind of what we could call the cultic milieu, anything that is rejected is accepted by that, so that gains sort of that appeal. And that in that regard, like these this association between like the far right and neo-paganism becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You understand where I'm going with this? Like we always imagine, like for example, the Nazis to be like these kind of pseudo-pagan kind of like blood wizards, who just worship this, these Aryan godmen and whatnot. But there's a whole that's a whole other podcast, unfortunately. But the fact of the matter is, like the Nazis were tremendously Protestant. They were their own kind of ethno-nationalist brand of Protestant mostly. But it's like undeniably true that if you look at the Norwegian Nazis, for instance, they were horribly Protestant. Like they weren't as pagan as they were anti-Catholic, basically.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And do you think then that there's a part of all of this then that also makes it just easier to focus on that one douchebag who's like wearing some pagan Nordic symbols while they're blaring Christian music outside and they're all talking about God this and God that, and have just come out of the evangelical churches and all that stuff. Do you think it's easier to simply just like, oh, look at this idiot over here?
Yeah, it's obvious. Yeah, it's easier to disassociate with the things you never associate with in the first place, right? And it's the same thing with and it's the same thing with kind of this this notion of Nazi occultism, right? You will see it even like serious scholarly books will tell you that like the Nazis had like this kind of like this blood religion is probably a good term actually for what the Nazis did, but to say that this is like some like neo-pagan thing, there were like small like historical Nazi groups who who definitely were neo-pagan in this weirdly social Darwinist way, like kind of like mythologized social Darwinism, but like very rarely do you see anything like of the kind like that a modern neo-pagan would recognize as their own, their own religion. And these people were extremely marginalized within the Nazi group. Some of them were completely banned even. But it's comforting for people, after the horrors of World War II, to say that, well, the Nazis really weren't like us. They had these weird ideas and they had these weird interests, and like they weren't church-going Christians like you and I, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's really that's also the danger, right? Because if we're not recognizing the fact that these Nazis, they were just exactly like modern human beings of all kinds, then we're also forgetting that it can happen again, right? We're basically ignoring that it is a matter of like your moral compass more than something that is inherent to your nature.
Yeah,
whether or not you do
90% of the people, have you ever seen that like that meme? It's kind of like, it's a very like self-serving kind of meme where there's all of these. I'm not gonna do it, but there's all these Nazis doing like the salute, and there's like one guy who's got his arms crossed, and they're like, yeah, be this guy, I'm sure, yeah, by all means, be this guy, but like 90% of us aren't that guy.
It's 90% of us hard to be that guy.
Yeah.
It's hard to be that guy when you're gonna get shot for being that guy.
Yeah. And most of us,
it's easy to say be that guy, 70 years later when there's no danger to you.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Many people are simply just willing to go along with whatever gives them the least hassle in any given moment.
Of course.
And that's always that means that you're going to be in with the ideology of your in-group. Be that like your little like redneck town, like you're in the Rust Belt or whatever, or if you're like a hipster living in like Brooklyn or whatever, I mean,
this guy on Capitol Hill, and obviously others like him who these white supremacist group who use these symbols. How much of it do you think is anything to do with the gods or any sort of religious side, more than it's just they look at the Viking culture and think, oh, these guys were warriors, so I want to use those symbols because of that. It's nothing for me anyway. They can be Christian, but also they just look at this culture and see these, the Viking warriors, they're meant to be the toughest, the hardest, the strongest. So they use those symbols to try and embody that rather than actually on a religious scale.
Yeah, well, it's a complicated question. What is religious? Scholars of new religious movements would, of course, say that none of these things are mutually exclusive. You can have all sorts of different ideas floating around that express themselves in different ways. But yeah, if you go on like the kind of weirder fringes of the far right, what is one of the biggest taboos today? Well, that's to be an atheist, basically. It's like the one thing that you should not be. There are other things that you should not be, according to them, but like one of the biggest taboos is certainly like atheism. That's like the biggest faux pas. Like even if you align yourself with them or something, like if you don't believe in some like sacred, principle, then that's like, well, what are you really? What that is, I think that is often just down to like whatever scene it is, and a lot of it is down to aesthetics, I think.